not everyone is going to want to participate in biometrics. So I definitely think it's going to be a deterrent. It's just one more nail in the coffin for U.S. tourism.
Welcome back to Closer Look on this Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. How was yours?
Busy.
Yeah, they're always busy.
Yours?
Not really busy. Yard work, right? Putting stuff away, and I hate this time of year. I absolutely hate it.
I thought you hired people to do that.
No, that's you. Moneybags over here. No, I just hate it's depressing, putting away the lawn furniture.
It is. Derek and I were just talking about it. It's totally depressing.
Yeah.
It felt like last week we took it all out, right?
Well.
And
I'm putting snow tires on tomorrow, so I'm not excited.
Well, in the city we're in right now, Sault Ste. Marie, last year, the first heavy, massive snowstorm was November 29th. So it's coming.
It didn't leave.
It didn't leave.
Oh, my God.
So what is this, November 29th? It's October 29th this week, so
Yeah.
we're a month away.
Or less.
Fun times.
Remember 2023? Remember that winter? I liked that winter.
Was it not much snow?
Oh, my God. We had like some snow in November, a little bit around Christmas, and then by February.
That's nice.
Oh, all right.
At least we have a little baseball to talk about while the snow's not here.
Yeah, we got a few things to talk about. Baseball, Trump, and Ford. Go. Baseball. What do you think?
It was good weekend. Good
weekend.
Games.
I'm happy with the split.
I loved the Colonel Sanders guy in the behind home plate. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of you saw this, right? People started talking about it online on Twitter and all social media. Who's is that Colonel Sanders?
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was Colonel Sanders. It was a plant by the company, right? They put him there. They bought him a ticket. It was great guerrilla marketing because what do you think? They probably had to pay $10,000 for that ticket, maybe. I'm not.
And worth every cent.
Yeah, I mean they wouldn't pay millions for an ad. It's actually an actor from Sudbury.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course, the name slips. I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
But Sudbury.com did a story on him a couple of years ago when he first got the gig. If I read the story right, the KFC was going through a bunch of headshots. He had an agent. He had a headshot.
Yeah.
And they picked him out of the crowd.
Wow.
Had a Zoom interview with him, and they liked the way he looked. And boom,
when you think about it, it's a smart way to market your business or company, right?
Yeah.
Put somebody right behind home plate with a big logo on a T-shirt.
Yep, there you go.
You can't buy that kind of
And Colonel
marketing.
Sanders is so distinctive. There's no mistake in that. But it was pretty good. Everyone was talking about it. Speaking of advertising that worked.
Yes, $75 million that maybe didn't work.
I think Doug Ford said today that as he doubled down, of course, on it, said that they ended up earning getting $300 to $400 million in earned advertising because they had so much publicity over this ad.
Yeah.
Right, and what happened.
Do you think Mark Carney's saying, Doug, way to go on that earned marketing? That's fantastic.
I know. Of course, it's Mark Carney that's left holding the bag, right? But he's been pretty good about it too, saying he hasn't criticized Doug Ford over it. He hasn't told him didn't tell him.
Certainly not publicly.
Not publicly to pull the ad down. But, I think overall Ford's he's getting some level over it. And some people are saying, hey, Doug, stay in your lane, get out of the way, right? There's some serious negotiations going on. But if the goal of an advertisement is to get attention, he did that tenfold with this one.
Yeah. And 10% tacked on.
Yes, that's right.
Tenfold, 10%.
Well, it hasn't officially come into play yet, I don't think. So, and the thing with Trump, and part of the commentary is, should we all blame Doug Ford for this? Well, is Trump he changes his mind every 5 minutes anyway. So is it going to matter what Doug Ford says, what he does?
Okay, speaking of the U.S. president and traveling to America, some things have changed. We covered this, was it last week or the week before we did a show on this? But now there's an update and a pretty big one.
Yeah, so first it was snowbirds last week about how if you're going to go there for 30 days or longer, you're going to have to be prepared to be photographed and fingerprinted, which is for me the crossing the line, the fingerprinting.
Yep.
It just seems like, it's when you get arrested. But they're now saying that there's new rules that came into effect last week that everyone traveling to the U.S. is eventually going to have to be photographed. So now I know there's all kinds of biometrics in place now. There's already, people use the LexisNexis card. They have their photos on there already. But this basically, they're looking at technology that if you're driving up to the border, it'll snap all your photos as you drive by. Yep. And they're going to stay in the system for 75 years, apparently.
Now, why do they need it for 75 years?
Well, that's one of the many questions we're going to ask Len Saunders. He's an immigration lawyer in Washington State. He's also a dual citizen. He's Canadian and American. So he has a lot of insight into what's happening here, and hopefully he'll help us break down the rules.
Lots of new rules coming down the pipe that will impact Canadians crossing the U.S. border. Last week on the program, we told you about how all snowbirds staying in the States for longer than 30 days now need to be photographed and fingerprinted. Now, there's an update. We're hearing news that all international travelers, no matter how long the trip is, will need to be photographed by U.S. authorities. Here to help us understand all of the details is Len Saunders, an immigration lawyer based in Washington State. Len, great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight.
No problem. Thank you for having me on your program.
All right, let's get right to it and dive in. Late last week, the Department of Homeland Security announcing a new rule that makes it mandatory for all non-U.S. citizen travelers, including Canadians, to participate in its facial biometrics program. As far as you understand, what's driving this change, Len?
Well, it's definitely security. So this is just another example of the American government using technology to screen individuals coming to this country. So I'm actually not surprised that they've now set this up as a rule for all foreign nationals coming to the U.S.
And how will it actually work? I'm sure it won't happen overnight.
Well, no, but a lot of this has already been happening. So I can give you a great example. I flew from Vancouver Airport to Miami about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I work in northern Washington State, so it's actually easier for me to fly from Vancouver Airport than Seattle. So I drove up from my office in northern Washington State, went through U.S. immigration at Vancouver Airport, pre-flight like they have at Pearson, like they have in Montreal at Trudeau. And what's interesting was I didn't show my passport once. So I went through security, showed my boarding pass, got up to U.S. immigration. I went up to one of the kiosks, did a facial recognition, went up to an actual U.S. officer, didn't hand him anything, and the officer said, "Have a nice day." So I entered the United States not showing my passport once.
Wow.
That shows you, what's happening in the future. Then when I was leaving Miami, going back to Vancouver, at the actual boarding gate, rather than showing my boarding pass, same thing, facial recognition. And it was interesting because the individual ahead of me on the Air Canada flight to Vancouver, for some reason, the biometrics didn't work for him. And so the flight staff, they had to manually enter in his boarding pass and his passport information, whereas I just walked up right after, facial recognition, and made my way onto the flight. It's almost like they're not going to require passports in the future for people coming to the U.S.
Yeah, the future is now. Now, do they already have your info, your photo, and your biometrics on file already?
Well, I think they do when like I was traveling, I'll give you a caveat, I was traveling on my U.S. passport. So even though I'm a dual citizen, normally when I enter the United States, I use my U.S. passport. So they obviously have that, my biometrics on file from when I apply for my U.S. passport. But, I'm not applying for my U.S. passport through Homeland Security. It's the State Department. So all of these agencies are obviously sharing information. Now, your average Canadian, when they get their passport and they go to the border, I'm assuming the Americans don't have that on record. But, there's all of this interchanging of information under the Pre-Flight Clearance Act of 2018. And I testified in front of the Canadian Senate around the time that it was passed 7 or 8 years ago. This information is shared between the two governments. It's really like when Trump talks about Canada becoming the 51st state and people laugh, it's almost like it's becoming the 51st state with the interchanging of or sharing of information like biometrics between the two countries.
Yeah, because that's the big question: is who's actually has access to this biometric? Do both sides of the border have access to these files?
I'm assuming they do. Now, for American citizens, when they take my biometrics, supposedly they only hold them for 12 hours. If it's a foreign national, they keep that information for 75 years. And it's interesting because I've said to clients for years, I swear the Americans don't have an erase button on their computers. So even though they say that they get rid of American biometrics after 12 hours, I highly doubt it. And I actually went to the Federal Register, which they published this new rule on Friday. So you can read the Federal Register. It's 150 pages of this new biometrics. Can you imagine trying to go through all that gobbledygook and trying to understand? So my feeling is, the Americans and the Canadians, they share information with regards to immigration, people leaving and going back and forth over the border. They share criminal information. They're the only two countries in the world that I know of that share criminal information. So if you have a conviction in Canada, the Americans have access to the RCMP. If you have a conviction in the US, the Canadians have access to the FBI. So, I'm assuming there's going to be a sharing of this facial biometrics between both countries.
Len, I'm going to ask you the most obvious of questions. Why on earth do they need to keep the picture for 75 years?
Well, it sounds ridiculous. I totally agree. Most people are going to be dead by then. So who knows why they would say 75 years. I'm in my mid-50s. I'd be 125 years old. So who knows what the Americans are up to with this information. But, it's a slippery slope. It started with fingerprints. It started with, people getting Nexus cards and that being shared between the two countries. So who knows what's going to come next? And, I'm assuming most people, when they go through, they think, whatever, I'll just comply with it. But there's going to be a lot of people who say, I don't need to go to the U.S. I can fly to Mexico. I can go to Cancun rather than going to Maui. I don't have to share my biometrics there. And I just don't want to participate in any of this big brother kind of U.S. overreaching.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned that, I'll ask you about that. I mean, we're seeing that. We're seeing the numbers lower than usual. Fewer people are traveling to the United States. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from clients?
Well, from clients, I'm hearing people are either pissed off, right? They're pissed off at the rhetoric from the U.S. federal government. They're pissed off at the tariffs, right? If people are booing the United States in sports stadiums in Canada, they're not coming down here to go shopping. So they're pissed off, or they hear these stories of Canadians being detained, so they're scared. So here we are, not even a year into this current administration, and what's happened is there's been a huge decrease in the amount of travelers to the United States. But most of these border towns, they're impulse buys. You hear about Las Vegas. You hear of, 15 to 20% down in tourism. So it's not just Canadians, it's other nationals who are hearing the rhetoric. They're hearing about people being detained, and they just don't want to come to this country. I get it.
Len, let me ask you this. Do you think these new rules will lead to an even bigger hit for the American tourism industry?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely not going to help. When you hear these new rules coming out with biometrics, it's just another deterrent for Canadians and other nationals for coming to this country. Right? Not everyone is going to want to participate in biometrics. So I definitely think it's going to be a deterrent. It's just one more nail in the coffin for U.S. tourism.
I guess on the other side of the coin, right? This is kind of the wave of the future. We've seen, I think, other countries have incorporated facial biometric technology. Canada uses it for international arrivals. I'm just looking at my notes here. The European Union, I think, is rolling out a program as well that requires non-EU citizens to be fingerprinted and photographed. As much as this concerns a certain segment of people, maybe us included, is this just the way of the world now, Leonard? People are just going to say, well, this is part of it, and a couple of years from now, everyone's just going to be totally fine with giving their biometrics over to the government?
Well, I definitely do think it is a wave. It's what's going to happen in the future. So I think you're going to see more of this. The problem is the timing of this, right? With so few Canadians wanting to come to the United States, it's just going to deter people from coming until maybe there's a new administration and people feel more comfortable entering the United States, giving biometrics, and coming and spending their money here.
Len, how concerned are you that the collection of this information could later be used for other reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with why the info was originally collected?
Well, a good example is you hear about these student protests in the United States. All it takes is, biometrics, analysis of some of these protesters to all of a sudden find out that maybe it's a Canadian citizen. I went to school down here as a foreign student. So I could only imagine if I was involved as a student protester when I went to law school, and maybe they would have used, biometrics like they're collecting now in order to identify individuals. So you can definitely see how this information can be used for other purposes, not just entering the United States as a visitor.
Absolutely. This might be an unfair or maybe difficult question to answer, but you're a dual citizen. You're three citizenships, actually, as you mentioned before we started, American, Canadian, and British. You've been working as a lawyer in the United States for a long time. How different do things feel in the last couple of years, Len, from your perspective, just the way our relationship is between Canada and America right now?
Well, I practice right near the Peace Arch Port of Entry, where they have a big kind of arch. It's like the Arc de Triomphe, and on it, it says, "May these gates never be closed." and, children of a common mother. So there's always been this kind of, we're all part of kind of one country. But from what I've seen over the last 8 to 10 months, there's definitely been a lot of anger. It's almost like big brother, little brother, right? Little brother up in Canada feels like they're being taken advantage of by big brother. And there just doesn't seem to be the cooperation that you've seen in the past between the two countries. The rhetoric is horrible. Calling Trudeau the governor and wanting Canada to become the 51st state, it's just a horrible PR image. And it's almost like the Americans don't care, or they don't know what's going on. A lot of Americans are so isolated in this country that they're unaware of what's been happening to the drop in tourism. The further you get away from the border, there's less interest. Obviously, where I am in northern Washington State, every time someone hears the tariffs going up, the rhetoric, the anti-Canadianism from the president, it's another nail in the coffin, and people are just sick and tired in these border towns relying upon Canadians when they see the lack of traffic because of this rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because we live in a border town as well. We're in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is right on the border of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. We see the same thing. Then the bridge is completely dead. There's never anybody on. Is that pretty much the same where you are? Or is there still some traffic going back and forth?
Oh, no, there is traffic, right? The daily commuters, but your average person coming down to get gas and going grocery shopping, they just have decided not to come down. I literally have to coax clients over the border, right? Even though I'm a Canadian, I'm not a Canadian attorney. So my office is in the US. That's where all my files are. That's where my computer. So I need clients in my office. So I literally have to talk people off the side of a cliff saying, no. You're not going to get arrested. You're not going to get asked if you like Trump. You're not going to be detained. They're probably not going to go through your cell phone. But a lot of Canadians said, you know what? I'd rather do this virtually. You can email me the stuff. We can do a Zoom call. I just don't want to enter the United States. I've never seen that. I've been practicing for almost 25 years in Blaine. This is almost like COVID all over again, but the borders are open. I can understand during COVID where people couldn't come down because the borders were closed, but it's just like COVID, but the borders are open, and just so many Canadians, they're just not comfortable coming down here, or they just don't want to spend their money in this country. And I get it. Yeah,
I get it too. It's hard to blame people because, as it gets progressively different as you go. Yeah. There may come a day where they will say, hey, give me your phone. I want to look through it. Or the fact that they're fingerprinting people now as they're coming over, you could see why people would. It makes me hesitant to go over.
And what's interesting too is, so if they're going to be doing biometrics at the airports, that's easy, right? You're already walking through U.S. immigration. How are they going to do biometrics, facial recognitions? Yes. If you have a carload, like I have a wife and 4 kids, so there's 6 of us. What are they going to do? Put the camera in the back of the minivan or the Yukon to try to get everyone's biometrics? The logistics of having to do this at a land port of entry seems very difficult. So I'm interested to see how they're actually going to figure out doing biometrics when people are in their cars traveling over the border.
It's interesting. I think I'd read in one article that they're actually testing cameras that will take a picture of the car as it's driving through. Yeah, and snapping pictures like that. To get all 6 of you.
Anyway, this technology is going to be fascinating when they finally use it, if it actually works.
Absolutely. And I guess just real quickly back to the timing of all this, just so our listeners are clear, the new rule was announced last week. It's going to come into effect, I think, at the end of December, but it's going to take some time to kind of get this rolling out, I would assume.
Well, exactly. Like at the airports, as I told you, I went through this 2 or 3 weeks ago myself, flying in and out of the U.S. So I think it's already been there. I think it more applies to the land border crossings. And they're going to have to figure out the logistics on how that actually works. So they've now published it in the Federal Register. So it's going to be a new law in the United States. So they have to publish it. And I think there's comments on it for 30 days. And I guess, going through, Vancouver, if you're taking an Alaskan cruise, you'll be doing it at the cruise ship terminal too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right, yeah.
Just so you know, we've also introduced a new policy on this show. We're photographing all our guests for future reference. Just so you know, that's been done.
I have nothing to hide.
Len, before we let you go, anything that we didn't cover immigration-wise tonight that we should have?
No, it's just, here we are 9 or 10 months into the current administration, and it's been exhausting for me trying to keep up on all of these new rules, the tariffs, the work visas, charging $100,000 for work visas. I can't imagine another 3 years to go. I'm going to be near retirement by the end of this administration because it's exhausting just trying to keep, tabs on what the federal government is doing.
Well, we'll make sure we check on you every once in a while. We'll have you back on the show every once in a while just to make sure you're okay.
Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
You too. From Washington State this evening, there's Len Saunders, a U.S. immigration lawyer. Thanks, Len. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
I remember years ago going across into the States. You mentioned we're in a border town to get gas, a few groceries, because, it was worth it. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, given the U.S. dollar versus Canadian and all that stuff, I don't do it. But even if it was at par, knowing you would have to potentially go through those kinds of things to gain access, no way, man.
The thing that I didn't ask, Len, that makes you wonder too, you give your Canadian passport to the U.S. border agent. They scan it.
Yeah.
Doesn't something show up on their screen that has your photo? Like I assumed it would. It's all
I always thought it did, yeah.
What else would be showing up on their screen? I'm sure it would be whatever information, because he's right. We have unprecedented sharing arrangements with the U.S. government. We're basically, we're not the same country, but we have the same, we've always had the same beliefs and same values, and we share a lot of security information like that. I'm going to ask the next time I go through the border, I'm going to ask the border agent, well, after you scan that, what shows up on your screen?
Do you think they'll answer? Because sometimes they're, a little curt.
I mean, if they're bored and there's not, it doesn't look like they're getting much action.
Okay, true story. I'm never going to get into the States. The first time we first moved here.
Is this another you crossing the border?
This is another one? I was so excited to go across into America.
When you were a kid?
No. It was, however many years ago.
Okay.
Pull up to the booth, hand my passport, and I say to the immigration officer, "Good morning, how are you today?" I'll be the one asking the questions. My dreams were crushed in like 3. I was so excited to go.
Is that what they said?
That was exactly what he said. I'll be the one asking the questions.
You'll be taking your own selfie for them pretty soon. Just here you go, pass it over. It is fascinating. And we get all ramped up about, the latest news, what's happening next. But there's a much bigger picture here going on, right?
Yeah.
Like we live in a world and this is just the next step in the kind of technology we've used for surveillance and security for a long time. But it is, literally, he walked through every security checkpoint without showing a document.
It's like the Matrix.
It's the Matrix right there. Maybe we're all living in the Matrix.
I don't want to live in the Matrix.
This is all simulated.
I know. All right. Is that it?
Unless you want to talk about Colonel Sanders again.
No, maybe tomorrow.
All right.
That's enough for today. Closer Look Podcast.ca is where you will find us online. Closer Look at villagemedia.ca. Feel free to send us an email anytime. We'd love to hear from you. And, of course, you can follow us all over social media. Tonight's show, as always, produced by Derek Turner. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Enjoy your night. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.